Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Humans Are Insects, written by Catfish21SM. Humans are insects. This thought once prevailed throughout the mightiest species to ever step foot in the galactic stage. They were right, in a way. The Crow-Chavik just found a new world, vibrant and brimming with life. Most other species would have turned it into a protected zone and tried to study the natives there to learn more about them. Most Crow-Chavik, however, were not in their mindset. They were far more technologically advanced than the humans could ever dream of being. When they saw the Earth, they did not see a living, breathing Deathworld populated with dangerous predators, no. They saw a resource-rich planet populated by technologically inept insects. Insects that could be easily crushed. Growing up on a Deathworld meant nothing if the other party was so far more advanced than you that you could not even comprehend their technology. That's what most species in the galaxy would have thought. They all would have shared the same mindset. The humans awoke one morning. Well, some of them did. Some awoke in the middle of the night to sirens blaring out in the streets. Others had their workdays interrupted by newscasts and warnings. The young children were dismissed from schools and sent home to their parents. They all witnessed the same massive tower of the size of one of their largest cities landing on their planet in the middle of their ocean. What the Crow-Chavik were after was not the water, nor was it the fish or fossil fuels. They had no need for those things. It was what sat in the center of the planet, a molten iron core. The iron in its molten state would be easily malleable and easy to extract. The massive tower-like structure served as an extractor, refinery, and factory all in one. It drilled down and began to extract the iron core. At first, the humans were completely boggled by this massive drill. They thought that it was a race who had come in peace. They attempted communications, but that didn't last very long. They were completely ignored, and when they noticed what was coming out of the massive factory, they understood what was going on. The tower was not a spaceship. It was a mining station. It was stealing their iron core and transporting the metal to space to build new ships and all other supplies. The humans quickly switched to offensive mode. It did nothing. The Crow-Chavik's tower was protected by gravity manipulation devices. These weren't actually meant for defensive purposes. Their true purpose was just to keep the device stable in a high-gravity environment on the planet. However, these scientists decided that it would be more than enough to protect against anything the humans could throw at them. They were correct. The humans with their primitive weapons that depended on launching solid projectiles could do nothing against the gravitational devices. And a mining station designed to travel through solar storms could easily handle much more than even the most powerful nuclear weapons and EMPs. The humans were completely defenseless. They were insects who could do nothing in the face of a superior technology. Not even their numbers meant anything. They sent weapon after weapon, person after person. Hundreds of thousands turned into millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions, until nearly a tenth of the population of the planet had failed to do any damage to the device at all. This all in the course of only a few months. Human scientists predicted that the device would take a better part of 100 years to fully extract the molten core of Earth. However, they were already starting to see changes to their world after only a few years. The humans posed zero threat to the Crow-Chavik. Even if they were taken in by another race, their numbers in the mere billions would do little to nothing to help in any kind of battle. Currently, the galaxy was at peace. The only reason that the Crow-Chavik could do what they wanted was because the rest of the galaxy, banded together, would be an equal match for them, and the human territory was well within their borders. The extinction of one primitive species was enough to start a war that would last for millennia, result in tens of trillions of deaths, give the Crow-Chavik a possible advantage. Small skirmishes were common already, but a full-blown war was feared by everyone. Everyone except the Crow-Chavik, that is. they were more than willing to go into a full-blown conflict. The Crocavic were not actually a predatory species. Only 3 sapient species in the galaxy were considered predatory, aside from the humans. There were the Pulingai, which consumed small animals, and their world animals would be the Earth equivalent of insects. They were similar to bats on Earth, but much larger. There were the Nitaha, which were omnivores who mostly fed on plants, but could consume flesh when absolutely necessary. Then there were the Brahurari, which were scavengers. They almost never hunted their prey unless they were desperate. Even then, they were very bad at it. The Crocavic were fully herbivores. However, they developed on a level 3 Deathworld. They were constantly under threat from predators and starvation. They evolved to be extremely territorial. They lived in large herds, which allowed them to work together to protect themselves. But they would defend their territory with extreme vigor. As the herd grew naturally, the territory did as well. This evolutionary path led them not to be aggressive expansionists, but just to be aggressive at defending their territory, which slowly grew as their population grew. In fact, keeping them in check was fairly easy. All you had to do was keep the population in check. This is why the small skirmishes never turned into full-blown war. They weren't interested in conquering the galaxy, merely obtaining the needed resources. When their people were killed off during the skirmishes, they would become less aggressive. Fewer people means fewer resources are needed. When fewer resources are needed, their territory doesn't need to be as large to produce said resources. This steady balance had been maintained for tens of thousands of years now. However, they were slowly winning their wars, and their territory was slowly expanding. Humans weren't the first, and no one expected them to be the last. In fact, the rest of the galaxy didn't even know about the humans, but if they did, they would have merely shrugged it off as a necessary sacrifice. The humans, on the other hand, did not see it that way. What nobody knew about the humans, including the Crocavic, who failed to study them before their invasion, was the humans' ability to adapt. It was almost a universal law that progress in technology or understanding came mostly by mistake. No one who was satisfied with their current level of achievement rarely ever strives for improvement. If it's not broken, then why fix it, as the humans would say. The Crocavic were the only race who had any semblance of actual scientific study at all. Of course, the nations would study the environment and try to manipulate it, but they were generally satisfied with their current level of technology. It did what it needed to do. Generally speaking, there was no reason to improve on technology that worked perfectly fine, and there was no reason to study the technology of the others and try to understand it unless it did something far better than yours could and would be a major boon to your civilization. This only ever happened for uplifted species, but the time and cost of such endeavors was such that other species would consider it completely moronic to even try if you weren't guaranteed significant gains. This was even more true for the scientific advancement. To reach a level that they were at took hundreds of thousands of years after their species reached space. There was very little difference in the fact between a species that had been in spacefaring for 1,000 years and 10,000 years. Many species only ever reached space because the gravitational forces of their planet were low enough to make it a fairly simple task. Some even developing in gravity not much greater than the human Earth's moon. If they had taken the time to observe the humans, then the Crocavic might have understood that what the so-called insects had done by reaching space on their high-gravity world. With their primitive technology, this was a virtual miracle. The humans had accomplished what many other scientists in the galaxy would call impossible. Of course, the act of them reaching space was far from a miracle and only really a matter of time. Doing it with their current level of technology and with their current rate of technological development was downright horrifying. Had they studied humans more closely before just downright invading them, they might have understood, at least a little, about the humans' adaptability and ingenuity. But they did not care. They saw insects to be crushed and resources to be taken. That was all the Crocavic worried about. They didn't care about what would have been impossible for any other race in the galaxy. They only cared about what was right in front of them. what they could do and what the humans could not do. The humans, on the other hand, cared about one thing and one thing only: survival. They immediately began stripping their minds and placing all of their efforts into tearing down their cities for resources. The humans would stay in compact shelters, basically tents outside of cities, with tens or even hundreds gathered under large tent-like structures. They did this while they tore down their own cities and infrastructures for resources. They built ships, not warships, colony ships. They built massive self-contained colony ships, or perhaps it would be better to call them habitats. The humans knew that their home world was lost cause, so they focused on getting as many humans to space as possible. They moved to the asteroid belt, where they had ample resources. The Crow-Ka-Vik were not worried about their asteroids. They were only worried about the liquid metal core of planets that could be easily mined and converted into whatever they needed. The humans struggled to survive, losing most of their habitats. But their struggle only motivated them to work harder. They began building automated probes to study the ships that were destroying their homeworld, mining stations, and the transport ships and the probes. They were being ignored. The Crow-Ka-Vik knew they would die off eventually, and even if they didn't, they would never become a threat. Just insects roaming around to be squashed under their feet as they trampled around their territory. They paid the predators no heed. They could care less about the buzzing of gnats angry about the fruit that they had just stolen from them. Unlike the Crow-Ka-Vik's level 3 Deathworld, the Earth was a level 9 Deathworld, the only one to ever be discovered in the galaxy. Based on stories told by the humans and scarce records of their homeworld, some argue that Earth should even be classified as a level 10, but most find the idea to be completely ridiculous, some going so far as calling a level 9 a generous number. Those are the ones who don't take the time to go through the records, however, and who only go based on what they hear. They don't tend to trust what they hear either. It is admitted that much of what is known about Earth comes from word of mouth of humans who never actually lived there. How could any species, even humans, survive on a planet where the vast majority freezes over for months on end every human year, then drastically changes to hot, humid climate for several months on end? The mere notion is ridiculous. Worlds like that do exist, however, and data of the Earth supports these ideas. But even if it were true, the humans should only have been able to survive in the areas they saw fairly consistent weather patterns, which would mean that they had a much smaller population than records support. There is much debate over these matters currently. That being said, the humans had to. They were forced to. Their survival throughout not only the years of the invasion, but their entire evolutionary history required them to be unimaginably adaptive. To be able to survive, become the apex predators, and then reach space with such primitive technology. They had no choice but to defy what was essentially considered the law of nature by most other species. Most species saw technological development as another form of evolution. It happened at a small pace for every other species. But the humans defied all logic. They studied, they learned, they adapted, and they kept adapting. As they watched their homeworld collapse in on itself, as they watched the Crow-Ka-Vik leave their space, they kept adapting. The Crow-Ka-Vik, as most other species would, assumed that the humans would just die off. They had no suitable world to return to. They did not have a warp or scanner technology to locate another suitable world. Their technology would fail with time, and they would die out. At best, they might be around for a few thousand years as they continue to grow in population and consume the resources offered by their asteroid belt. But that was it. After those resources were gone, they would have nothing left. Sure, their asteroid belt contained ample resources that could easily be harvested by the Crow-Ka-Vik. But for the Crow-Ka-Vik, it was much easier and more efficient to harvest entire planets like they had done for Earth. Planets whose core were already molten and the iron could easily be refined and shaped. The Crow-Ka-Vik would only focus on other sources when more rare materials could be found in a great abundance. But the humans defied common logic. They didn't just survive, they adapted and thrived in their new environment. But that wasn't even the most terrifying thing about humans. The thing that entire galaxies would soon learn to fear is that humans do not forget. The humans keep records, they pass on stories, and they burn with a passion, desire, hatred, and they need, not want, but they need revenge. It's an evolutionary need. It's how they conquered their world. They hunted to extinction, killed off any predators that were better adapted than them. Anything that posed a threat, it was brought to extinction. Within 25 years of leaving their homeworld, the humans began to study the technology of the Mer-Ka-Ba. They merely watched them and collected data. They shared their information with other humans and learned and grew and adapted. They knew FTL was possible now and was their goal. Within 50 years of leaving their homeworld, they began experimenting with FTL on a small scale that they knew the Mer-Ka-Ba would never notice. Within a year of the Mer-Ka-Ba leaving their system, they began testing FTL on a much larger scale. Within 20 years, they had fully mastered primitive FTL technology and began sending out probes. Within that same 20 years, they also discovered no fewer than 3 new worlds that they could settle on, 2 of which were level 6 Deathworlds with only microbial life, and 1 was a level 4 Deathworld with a small, unintelligent life form. They all had gravity similar to Earth and a similar atmosphere. They would not require much terraforming. To most other species, including the Mer-Ka-Ba, these worlds would be considered completely uninhabitable. But to the humans, they were virtual paradises. The Mer-Ka-Ba were partially right. They compared the humans the same way a human would compare something to an insect. Unfortunately, the Mer-Ka-Ba failed to realize that the humans were not just any insects. They were more like human roaches. If you crush them, then they will come back with vengeance. If you nuke them, they'll feast on the corpses of all else that died. You will never end the humans. They will always survive, and they will always come back. But unlike the roaches, the humans do not just return in number, but in strength, with better tactics, and with their unnaturally disgusting adaptability. The humans reached these worlds, and their population boomed in what they called their paradise worlds. With their population booms also came technological advancements. For long, their strive to create FTL drives capable of safe and efficient travel between planets had driven them to create FTL even better than the Mer-Ka-Ba. Their knowledge of the ever-present threat of Mer-Ka-Ba invasion forced them to create weapons and armor capable of standing their ground. Before long, within only 150 years of the collapse of the humans' homeworld, the Mer-Ka-Ba became aware of another species within their territory. This new species had to go. The Mer-Ka-Ba sent a small scouting ship to check out the situation. What they found was a species they thought they had never seen before. How had they come out of nowhere and built FTL and colonized 2 additional planets, Deathworlds, no less, without even a Mer-Ka-Ba noticing? Well, they were noticing now, and they were not pleased. The humans, on the other hand, jumped at the opportunity to learn the full complexities of the Mer-Ka-Ba technology. The humans shot down the scouting ships and immediately began analyzing them. The Mer-Ka-Ba didn't really care. It was just a few scouting ships, no major loss. They lost far more in irregular skirmishes. They soon sent out a small fleet of battleships. Based on the intel they had on this new species, provided by the now-deceased scouts, this would be more than enough to take down the new enemy threatening their territory. They were met with technology far more advanced than what was originally reported. It had only taken a few months to get the reports back from the scouts and to begin analyzing the information. This new species must have been hiding their technology. Even so, the Mer-Ka-Ba was still more advanced than them. It was curious how a species with only 3 planets could produce such technology. But if their FTL tech was any indicator, then this was about right. They must have purposely stayed under the radar until the Mer-Ka-Ba picked them up due to their increased activity. They stepped up, and now they were going to pay for that mistake. Or so the Mer-Ka-Ba thought. After losing several battleships, they decided to take this new threat seriously. They would send in a full skirmisher fleet to each of the 3 planets. You can imagine their surprise when they, for the first time in their history as a species, were met with their own technology firing back at them. After their second defeat, their third going by human calculations, they decided that enough was enough. They declared full-on war with this new species. This is where they made their single largest mistake. They took several years to gather together and organize their ships. They had the capacity. They had to carefully and strategically move ships from their front lines to intercept this new threat while still securing their borders. This resulted in several years of relative peace that allowed the humans to do what they do best: adapt. They came with a full armada. They were met with ships that were few in number, but with technology so superior to their own that they were hard-pressed to do any damage to them at all. The more damage they took, though, the harder they had to fight. They could not allow this new species to exist. Unfortunately for them, that's exactly what the humans wanted. What the humans lacked now was not technology or scientific achievements, but resources. They were feeding the humans resources. As they fed the humans, the resistance grew stronger. As the resistance grew stronger, their war efforts increased. And as their war efforts increased, they only fed the humans more. It was at this time that the rest of the galaxy started to notice that something was up. The Crow-Havoc were retreating inward. This was extremely unusual for them. The Council decided not to push, considering that it might be a test of sorts to see if they could act aggressively as a show of weakness. They feared war if they pushed inward towards the Crow-Havoc territory. There was only so much that their humans could do, however. Even with their advanced technology, they only controlled 3 planets, and those planets weren't even close to their population caps. That was when the humans taught the galaxy what a real war looks like. You see, the humans, in order to prevent their own extinction, had to hold back on their homeworld when fighting wars against one another. They created unbreakable treaties and vowed to hold back their greatest weapons in order to prevent mutual destruction. Their next weapons would have been completely unimaginable to any other species, because no other species were expansionists like humans were. Other species created weapons for defensive purposes, not offensive. This was true even for the Crow-Havoc. So what happened next would have been considered a mere coincidence had the humans not personally admitted to it after the fact. On more than 100 Crow-Havoc city worlds, including their homeworld, pods dropped from the sky. Small escape pods like ships, no weapons or anything, just room enough for a few dozen people and never-before-seen compact FTL drive. These ships made landfall on the planets containing about a dozen Crow-Havoc military personnel each. Some were dead, one of which was swollen and contorted beyond all recognition, but most were alive. They explained that the humans had injected them with this new experimental drug, then simply crammed them into the ships and let them go. No explanation as to why. Some were very bruised and battered with welts covering their entire body. It was thought to be a warning of sorts, psychological warfare, though it had been a very long time since the Crow-Havoc were aware of this type of tactic. It was a common tactic used by predators to distinguish the weak from the strong in their herds. Though this was not going to work. The Crow-Havoc were intelligent. They would care for their sick and injured and would work together. This threat would not weaken their resolve, but strengthen it. Within only a few weeks, military activity exploded among the Crow-Havoc. They would not take this threat sitting down. They would stand up and fight to the last. Little did they know, this was exactly what the humans wanted. The humans couldn't last much longer, only a few years at most. Even with their rate of advancement and growing military power, they were limited in the number of humans that could fight. That's why they devised the single most horrific weapon ever to hit the galactic stage. Within a few weeks of taking in the released prisoners sent by the humans, more than 10 billion Crow-Havoc had died from mysterious illness. Their bodies would swell up and contort. It was the single most painful and grotesque-looking plague in the history of their people. And worse yet, it spread so well that it could not be treated. Any doctors working on a treatment would die before they could make any progress at all. They ended up quarantining entire planets. By the time they finally got a sample safely grown in the lab, over a quarter of their population had been infected and killed. The death toll for infection, 99.9 reoccurring %. This was a super virus unlike anything anyone in the entire galaxy had ever even imagined possible. It went against all logic. Nothing like this could ever survive. Even if it had mutated from another similar species on their planet, it should not have had such a high death toll. It was as if the virus's entire purpose in existence was to kill. This went against natural selection, against the very laws of nature. But it existed, and they had to deal with it. They did survive, just barely. Using their advanced technology, they were able to create a cure and send it to their remaining population just in time. The virus would circulate and reinfect individuals multiple times. Building up an immune response was nearly impossible. However, with their treatments and proper quarantine procedures, they were able to reduce the rate of infection by about 10%. Not that it did them any good, but most importantly, they were able to increase the chances of survival from 1 in a billion to about 22.3%, enough to save their species from extinction. Just in case, because this virus was prone to mutate, they had completely quarantined several worlds that were never infected. No on or off traffic allowed in the system. The humans, however, they did not care about these regulations. In fact, they took full advantage of the weakness. The invasion had completely stopped and the military almost gone. The remnants left to defend a few quarantine systems left in their territory. The humans were not finished. However, allowing a small respite would not hurt. The humans expanded outwards, colonizing more worlds and building their fleets larger and stronger. Curiously, they did not name any of their colonies after their homeworld. There was not a New Earth or a Terra 2.0, though they did name them after cities, states, nations, or empires of their world. Some were named after gods, others' names were chosen at random. Before long, they made contact with the galactic community. The message that they received is still contained within the record. It is as follows. "We come in peace or war, your choice. Choose carefully." The entire galaxy was in an uproar about this new message, coming from a completely unheard of species, and from within the territory of the Crow-Kavik. No one had any idea what was going on. They decided on peace. They were very happy that they did so as well, especially when they witnessed new terror. The humans finally decided to name a settlement after their homeworld. After tracking down the supply charts and finding the metal gathered from the planet's core, along with the metal repurposed for entire fleets of the defeated Crow-Kavik, they built a massive Dyson sphere colony around their native sun. They allowed the rest of the galaxy to witness the completion of this colony. They forcefully gathered up the remainder of the Crow-Kavik and placed them in a Dyson sphere. The Crow-Kavik couldn't even breathe under the heavy weight of the humans' native gravity. They slowly died, fertilizing the soil for their new, massive habitat. Some say that the soil in this habitat still maintains a slight shade of green, similar to the color of the Crow-Kavik's blood. But that was not even the most cruel thing those vicious predators did to the poor and innocent Crow-Kavik. No, they did not kill them all. Instead, taking a small number, only about 10,000, and releasing them back at their homeworld. Then surrounding the homeworld with an AI-guided satellite network that will immediately target anything resembling electronics or advanced technology. The humans perpetually forced the Crow-Kavik to live the rest of their existence in what was essentially the Stone Ages, never again to return to the galactic community. The humans made it clear that this was not a threat, but a warning to the rest of the galaxy. So you can imagine the panic and utter horror that enveloped the Council when they learned that the humans were expansionist predators by nature. They were not merely territorial and defensive like the Crow-Kavik, who had conquered nearly half the galaxy previously, but they actively sought to expand their territory. With their current technology, no one could stop them, and they made it clear that even if the entire galaxy banded together against them, they would only end up like the Crow-Kavik. This panic was eased not much longer after this, when it was learned that the humans could not thrive on worlds that most other species found habitable. The humans' extreme adaptations to their death world required them to inhabit other death worlds. The primary concern was the gravitational level. Theoretically, a human could survive on a level 1 death world that had high gravity. However, few of those had ever been discovered. The humans did not care for war. They only cared about survival and constant improvement. They would not war with us easily over resources. The only thing they really wanted from us was our worlds, because our habitable worlds and their habitable worlds were so different. We were able to work out a compromise fairly easily. The humans were not restricted to any territory. They could colonize any planet that they wanted in any system, even habitable systems, unless those worlds were already inhabited by another sentient race. They were not allowed to drive off sentient inhabitants of other worlds, even those without spaceflight, as the Crow-Kavik had done for resources. They also could not gather resources from claimed systems, or a system with any sentient life, even those who had not yet discovered spaceflight. They were given an entirety of the former Crow-Kavik territory, except several systems that were recently taken by them. They agreed to allow other species to inhabit habitable worlds in this territory, so long as they showed no hostility, followed their laws, and the humans would retain all rights to all resources within these territories. Everything seemed to be going wonderfully, and far better than anyone had ever expected. The humans were far more cooperative than anyone had ever imagined. Everyone was overjoyed by their new system of cooperations with the humans. Honestly speaking, most of the other species would have happily conceded to many of these concessions just to avoid war with the humans. But the humans were the ones who drafted most of these arrangements. Because of this, it not only came as a surprise, but an enormous joy for the other members of the galactic treaties to accept these terms. That is at least until the human representative asked the single most horrifying question that anyone in the galaxy had ever heard. Something that sent shivers down the spines of every non-human who heard it. Something so unthinkable, so unimaginable, so expansionistic that no one had ever even considered, let alone dreamed about the possibility. After all other discussions and agreements were finalized, with a wry, predatory smile on her face, brace yourself for these words. This is not a lie, but the truth. The more easily frightened species may want to stop reading here. She asked, "What should we do about the other galaxies?" End of story. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Dragon Soup, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Red Panda 121, Leslie 517, Bushmaster 177, Caspar Arnold, Cam Maxwell, Sans the Skeleton, Light Jock, Dragzoon WRE, and Lord Azrikol. Thank you very much.